In this chapter, I want to talk about some exciting things that have happened to Moto, and it's interesting for me to see this coming from Moto 1.0. You know, back in 1993 or 4, when Lightwave 3.0 came out, they had a little animated toaster that was jumping around, and big eyes came out. We thought that was just the coolest thing, and how can you do that? And that was the introduction of Bones back in Lightwave. And of course, over time, Maya has come out, and Cinema 4D, and all these other programs that also do character animation. But Moto took their time, and the guys at Luxology, and introduced this new rigging system. And it first started a couple of versions ago with just a very simple 2D IK, an inverse kinematics chain right down here, planar IK. And it was okay for robotic arms and things, and you could parent them together and do some things. We've done training on that. But now they have a full body IK system in. But what is inverse kinematics? What is IK? Think of this. Think of a little puppet on a string. And when you pull that string, the arm goes with it. Simple enough? That's IK. Forward kinematics is more like when you have like a maquette for drawing or something like that. And you move the body a little, and then you move the upper arm, and then you move the lower arm, and then you move the wrist, and you pose it like that. That's forward kinematics. Well, that's what all of it blended together creates a character animation. So let's go ahead and set that up. Let's go to File. What you want to open up is the Blue Man rig, just this top one right here. It's in your Scenes folder. Okay, and I'll press the A key. This is a really horrible little guy put together, but will work for us for this thing. He's got some tiny little hands. There's our light and camera down there. Let's press O for options. Get to visibility, and let's turn off lights and cameras, just so it's a little clearer. So how do we set this up? Is it complex? No, not really. And I know that there's a good bit of information out there already on this, so I don't want to duplicate much. But the process of setting up a rig for a character in Moto, a character in Lightwave, character in Cinema 4D, in Maya, is very, very similar. So if you watch other programs, how they do it, you can actually copy that in here. However, I find that Moto's setup works faster and easier. And you got to remember that the whole Moto world was at the speed of thought, modeling at the speed of thought. Well, that now carries through all the way up through version 601 when you're now rigging at the speed of thought. So let's go ahead and set this up. Initially, a character always has a root bone, kind of like a home base. So we've got the dummy, right? Dummy rig, that's what I call him. And what we want to do is in your setup tab, you're also going to find a sub setup tab. And in here you're going to see a draw command, which is curve and skeleton hierarchies of parenting and unparenting. You can match and align. We're going to do that later with inverse kinematics. Align to work plane, and some other tools to set up the work plane. But for right now, really, we're going to concentrate on skeleton. Now, if you click next to that commands tab, there's a tool properties tab. It's blank right now other than snapping. Well, that activates when we hit skeleton. So what I want to do is take this tool properties tab, click and hold and drag it, and let's pop it right next door to itself. That way you can actually see the properties as we're doing things rather than clicking around so much. And I'm going to right click on the schematic and delete it. Okay, and this will be our own new little workspace. So what I want to do with this guy is put a rig in there. So I'm going to click skeleton, and of course when I do, the draw hierarchy command populates. And you can see that the mode, very much like our deformers that we used earlier, those are the same. Add, edit, insert, delete. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. We've got a couple of buttons here, and what I'm going to do is turn off intersection, and we don't want symmetry right now. And down here under naming, unless you're working with a big company that has a very strict structure of how you're going to rig and this model is going to go to somebody else for animation, you might want to change these. But for the most part, for you and me working on one computer, these default names will actually work just fine. So what I want to do with the skeleton is just start drawing. Now, when I click, I actually get joints. And this is kind of important to know. We're calling them bones once in a while. Everybody's been doing it. But essentially, you're building joints. This little point right here is a joint, and this little guy is a joint. And we're going to be doing a lot of clicking around and back and forth to get these things activated. But you'll see that it's really, really simple to set up. All right. But when I do, and I can just kind of click around, when I rotate, notice that I'm actually in the center of the body pretty well. That's because of the view that I'm in. But it's very easy to actually click outside of it. And then you're going to have to line it up like every other program in the world. So what I want to do is click intersection. And what that's going to allow me to do is not worry about the placement of my joints so much, just getting their position right. So for instance, as soon as I click in here, it's automatically just adjusting itself to the model. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So I'm going to click right up here, right to about mid-chest. And now when I rotate around, you'll notice that those joints are actually trying to do their best to line up. So it doesn't necessarily matter too much in this very beginning. When we get to the arms, it's going to be key. So let's do this. We'll make things accurate. We're going to come to the right view. So it's an orthogonal view. Intersection is off, symmetry is off, and we're just going to start building. So we're going to have our root, just a tiny little joint set up right there. And we want this one right about in the middle. And then we're going to come up to about mid-body. And then we're going to come up to about the shoulder area like that. And let's jump back to our front view like that. So now it's pretty well lined up down the center. I think our character is a little bit off, but it'll work just fine for us. So very simple joints. Let's turn this off for a minute and take a look what we got. Okay, so nice little structure there. And maybe the root in this guy can come down a little bit further. Okay, now I've already turned off my skeleton command. If I want to edit these, it's not very hard. And I can click on that root, press a command like W for my transform, and they're all right here. And I'll move this. But notice that the whole structure is moving. Yeah, I don't want that. I just want to move the bottom ones a little bit. That's where child compensation comes in. So turn that on. Okay. This panel popped up when I hit transform. This is why I separated this panel here so you can see what's going on. So now I can actually, not like that, but I can actually move this down, and then I can maybe take this one and move that down. Okay, so very easy to adjust these after the fact. When you're building them, you can do that as well. They can be live, and you shouldn't have any issues. All right, so let's go ahead and build up the arms from here. So I'm going to just position this a little bit like that. Make sure he's centered out. Just kind of like that. It's not super important that those have to be right down the center for what we're doing, because the influence is going to be pretty fine for most everything in the center. When you got a narrow little arm, that's a little more important, but a big body like this, a little bit off won't matter too much. All right, so how do we continue down the arm? Well, the root that I created here, this guy, if I double click it, you can see that that entire chain gets selected. Now take a look at our items tab. You can see here we have skeleton joint, and if I open that up, there's the next one, there's the next one, and there's the next one. This belongs to this, which belongs to this, which belongs to this. That's why they're indented, just like an outline you learned in school. And I can rename this as root. And we're just calling it root because it's the base, like a tree. All right, hierarchy of a tree, get it? But you can call it home base. You can call it, the bottom, whatever you want. It doesn't need to be called root. And each one of these you can rename as you go. So this could be stomach joint, Now, to set up the shoulders, you might think to continue on from this joint right here, because that's our upper chest, right? Because that would be like other programs. So watch what would happen. If we hit skeleton, and let's first select this joint, hit skeleton, and then we got that top little joint right there, and then we click right at the shoulder blade. Well, looks like it's working, right? I've got intersection on, symmetry is on for the x-axis so that we build one down the left as well as the right. And the alignment is set to Z direction down the x-axis, which is the default, and that works fine for us. We're working down the Z, and X, if you look at our legend down here, is left and right. So I'm going to click a joint everywhere I need that character to bend. So the elbow, the wrist, and the hand. Okay, so you think, okay, great. But you got a little indication here that this is not right. See that little line? That works. You should not have another bone right here. Well, what does that mean? Well, watch this. If I double click this upper bone, look what happens. The entire length gets selected. If I double click that, you would think it's right. But when I double click this shoulder blade here, the left side as well as the right side gets selected. Well, what does that mean? That means that this hierarchy is wrong. And let's take a look over here. Because in order for all this character animation stuff to work, you got to have the hierarchies right. So look what happens. Skeleton upper chest, there's left and right. Or they're both parented to the upper chest that I named, but that's not really where we need it. we need them parented to the chest itself. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take these guys here, right click and delete. Yes to all. So when I select this main bone right here, this chest bone, it's got the upper chest joint and the lower chest joint, the chest itself. Turn on skeleton and select this joint right here. And I know it seems like it's awkward, but remember, it's from this whole bone structure right here. We're selecting the base of the chest. Same thing, we're going to add intersection on the x-axis, and then I'm going to click in the shoulder joint, and notice now I don't actually have a bone there. I actually have just that little connection line. We'll click down the arm like that, and with that intersection on, you can see that those bones actually lined up in the hand and the arm quite well. All right, so if any of you have done skelegons in Lightwave or done any kind of bones in Maya, you know that you lay it down in one view and then you got to go into another view and kind of adjust those. Well, you don't have to with this because that intersection works really well. So now what happens? Well, if I double click this arm, now just that hierarchy gets selected. Double click this one, just that hierarchy gets selected. And look at where they are. All of those, the upper chest joint as well as the chest left, chest right, are selected to the chest. And if I rotate this, thank you very much, that's working correctly. Okay, so if I want to create the neck though, then I would select that upper chest right there, turn on skeleton, select that joint, again intersection, but we do not need symmetry, and we're going to collect, and I'm not going to make a little tiny neck bone, I'm just going to make one right there, and then we're going to come up like this, like that. Now the thing is, will this one work for us? If we select this chest bone and we rotate, what happens? Thank you. Okay, but this hierarchy now can work on its own because it's parented to that upper joint, so that we can move the head around and have it do its own thing. Okay, and again, to test it, double click the root, everything selects. So that's working really well, and you can close it up here just to make sure. So this items list, even though it's just showing your items, it's actually a really good guideline to see where everything is and if you've got the right structure. So this is skeleton chest right. We would actually probably rename this one. This could be right arm root, and this one be left arm root. And trust me, doing this saves you hours later on when you're clicking around trying to find the right thing. This one is, let's open this up here. That's our head joint. This is our lower head joint. So you have upper and lower. And I'm just going to leave these as is for right now. But this one we can call neck. And this one I'm going to call, that'll be head. Let's just leave that, just so we know what's what. So neck and the arms. And that can be more like the roots for us. So let's save this, save as, and I'll call this upper bod rig. Save. All right, how do we do the bottom? Well, same way. We're going to select that bottom root. Then we're going to go to skeleton, and we want to select the joint. Right? Which joint? That base joint right there. Not the front one, but the base one. Come around. Compensation and intersection are on, symmetry on the X, and click at the top of the leg. Okay, and then I'll rotate around a little bit and come up. We'll come down to the knee, and we'll come down to that heel, and then let's come down to the foot, and then we're going to create more of a toe. Okay, now, last time I showed you, I turned off the tool and then I adjusted these. But because we have both sides going, I actually want to do it now while it's live because that will allow the symmetry to work properly. You cannot put symmetry on and move these because they're not actually symmetrical items. It's not like a polygon. So you kind of want to adjust these now before you turn off the skeleton tool. It's kind of important. It's not a big deal to align them later, but if you want them a little more precise, do it now while the tool is still on. You can't turn it off and turn it back on necessarily and get it to be as easy. Just, work faster. All right, so I'm just going to adjust these, pull these down just a little bit like that. And that intersection works beautifully. So there you go. Turn that off. Click the A key to fit. And you just rig the character. That simply. Not so hard to do in Modo. And if a dummy like me could rig this dummy, then I know you can do it. So now, if we had fingers, and we do have a thumb, how would we do that? Well, I kept this guy kind of simple so we don't get into too much intricacy with fingers and things. But same kind of thing. You're going to select this right here, this hand, turn skeleton on. You want symmetry on for the x-axis. Select this joint right here, intersections on. Let's just click right down the finger, and we're just going to put one little bone in there. So your indication, if you have your hierarchy right, is that line right there. If a bone draws, you have the hierarchy wrong. If you don't get this line, you have the hierarchy wrong. What does that mean? That means that when you move something like this arm, those other bones aren't going to follow properly. So setting up a rig in Modo is actually really not that hard to do once you understand the parenting and the hierarchy structure. Sometimes people overthink things, and it's easy to do. It can seem to be a little complex, but just one step at a time, understand what these are doing, and you should be in pretty good shape. Again, you're just creating joints everywhere something would bend. So a joint at the shoulder, a joint at the elbow, joint at the wrist, and so on. This bone in here that's created, as we're calling it, is really just referencing an influence. Okay, and it's creating a weight map around there once we do our next step, which is to actually attach these to the character. But I want to talk about the pose tool before we get too much farther. So go to the next video and I'll show you how that works.